The rain has already started. Thin, persistent. A drizzle that seeps into the joints of old buildings and older men. You are both, in a way. You weren't always an alchemist. In fact, you weren't even one yesterday. Yesterday you were trying to fix a broken door with melted cheese. Today you are unlocking the secrets of nature. The change was subtle. All it took was a robe with a hood, a stolen candle, and the correct use of the word tincture. Someone asked if you were a philosopher of matter. You said yes, very slowly while lighting something on fire. Now you're being paid in bread and suspicion. Your laboratory, if one is being generous, is the back room of a bakery that no longer bakes. Stone walls slick with damp, shelves bowed under the weight of dust and mystery. A rat watches you from the corner. You've named him Brother Cinnabar. On the table before you are your tools. A cracked ceramic bowl, a lump of sulphur that smells like divine punishment, 3 spoons, none matching, and an egg. There's also a book, of course. There must always be a book. It's mostly blank. Occasionally you write in it, using your left hand to make the letters look unfamiliar. This creates the illusion of ancient knowledge or madness. Either works. People come to you now with questions. Can lead become gold? Can illness be removed with herbs and salt? Can a man survive the winter if his soul is missing? You answer with phrases like, in theory, with the proper alignment, if the moon agrees. You never say no. You just say later. Sometimes you swirl water in a jar and stare at it meaningfully. People love that. It makes them feel like they're witnessing something. You've learnt that silence is your most powerful tool. Speak softly. Stare too long. When in doubt, squint. When you first arrived, someone asked if you were from Prague. You said deeper. They nodded and haven't asked again. In truth, you are from just up the road. But no one believes in wisdom that comes from up the road. There are others like you. Men in sheds. Women with powders. Monks with smoke-stained fingers. The town doesn't trust them, but it keeps them around, just in case. You have survived this long by offering not solutions, but performances. Mystery, packaged in robes. Hope, dressed as discipline. You've told them you are close, so close to discovering the elixir of life. They bring you offerings, dried flowers, scrap iron, goose bones. You thank them with dramatic reverence, then drop the items in a boiling pot and whisper something that sounds like a secret. They watch with wide eyes. No one asks what it means. They don't want answers. They want awe. Outside, someone coughs, then another. You hear the shutters slam across the lane. The plague hasn't arrived, but it's near enough to change the way people pray. That's why you're valuable now. Not because of what you know, but because of what they think you might. You don't argue. You simply light another candle, let the smoke rise, and say the phrase that's gotten you this far. This will take some time. You wake to the sound of dripping. Not rain, something inside. It has found a rhythm, slow, steady, slightly mocking. You hope it's just water. But in this building, assumptions are dangerous. The stone above your head is sweating again. You tap it gently and it doesn't fall. That feels like a win. You sit up in your makeshift bed, an old monk's robe folded 12 times on a slab of wood. Technically it's your workbench, but your spine has adjusted. It now serves both sleep and science. Your hood is nearby, draped over a rusted candlestick. You slide it over your head before you're even fully awake. The robe comes next, stiff from yesterday's spills, but still dignified. Dignity is essential, even if it smells like vinegar and disappointment. Your fingers are stained with charcoal and something green. You don't remember what. You decide it must be important. On your shelf the book waits, not a real grimoire, just a ledger you found in a collapsed granary. You filled its margins with circles, arrows, invented alphabets, and the occasional recipe for broth. When you open it in front of people, they hold their breath, so you open it often. The brazier in the corner is cold. You crouch beside it, strike flint to stone, sparks stutter into life. You whisper to them like they're shy children. Smoke curls up. You wave it in a purposeful spiral, just in case someone's watching. This is the hour for preparation, not for results. Never for results. You grind dried sage with a river pebble and hum tunelessly. You spoon ash into tiny jars. You balance a rotten apple atop a jar of milk, and call it the watching experiment. It doesn't matter what it does. It only matters that it's doing something. The town is waking. You hear it in the shutters being unlatched, the creak of handcarts, a cough that doesn't stop. Plague hasn't reached your village, but it has begun to loom, like a shadow on a nearby hill, close enough that people speak softer, walk faster, pray harder. That's good for business. You arrange your table just so, a candle on the left, a bowl of egg white and soot in the middle, a cloth-covered jar labelled in fake Latin on the right. The label says aqua abscondita, it's water from the well. You tell them it was gathered under a red moon. They nod every time. You've learnt to move slowly, not lazily, slowly. There's a difference. An alchemist should never appear rushed. Truth takes time, so does nonsense. By mid-morning the first visitor arrives. A boy, thin as a broom handle, clutching a wooden spoon. My mother's voice is stuck, he says. You nod as if this is common. You lead him to the bench. You swirl something in a bottle. You light a sprig of thyme. You whisper, the wind must be invited out. Then you lean in and say, return at dusk, alone. He nods solemnly, leaves the spoon as payment. You add it to your growing collection. Second visitor, a woman with swollen fingers. She believes they are cursed. You examine them, frown and say, the humours have thickened. You rub her palms with warm vinegar and hum a phrase from a song you once heard in a tavern. It sounds almost sacred when done slowly. You finish by wrapping her hands in cabbage leaves. She weeps with gratitude. You say, avoid geese until the next full moon. She gasps like you've caught the exact cause. You add avoiding geese to your book. Underline it 3 times. Midday brings a lull. You take inventory of your ingredients. 1 half-burned candle, 3 varieties of soot, labelled high, medium, and questionable. A feather, a coin bitten too many times, and something in a jar that might be garlic or might be regret. You mix 2 of these into a paste. Call it the mercury salve. Place it on the window ledge to cure. You will forget about it by tomorrow. Outside, someone screams. A cat, probably, or a man being cured. The sounds are similar. A knock at your door. It's the baker's daughter. Red-cheeked, anxious. My father's seeing ghosts, she says. You nod gravely. You invite her in. You light more smoke. You don't ask what kind of ghosts. You tell her, he has seen beyond the veil. The remedy is sent. You grind cloves into oil. Dip a cloth. Instruct her to wave it around his head while singing in thirds. She doesn't ask what thirds are. She just nods. You give her a small stone and tell her it wards off spectral repetition. You don't know what that means, but it makes her thank you twice. The rest of the day passes in a blur of visitors and invented prescriptions. Or Unter, a tanner who believes his shadow is leaving early. A woman who claims her bread is listening to her thoughts. A priest who wants to know if copper feels guilt. You give them all something. A charm, a powder, a story. That's what they want, not answers. But something to carry home. Something heavier than fear. By dusk, your laboratory smells like ash, vinegar and onion skin. Your robes are damp at the hem. You've been given 2 apples, a chicken feather, a song, and what might be a love letter. You put all of them in the same drawer. You sit, open the book. Write. Day 1. Smoke is trust. Silence is authority. A slow nod carries more weight than truth. You close it. Blow out the candle. The room softens. The rain has returned. The stone above you drips once more. You lie back on your folded robe. Hands stained, head full of invented wisdom. Today you were an alchemist. Tomorrow you will be again, if the ceiling holds. The town changes after sundown. It quiets in sound, but sharpens in shape. Lanterns flicker behind crooked shutters. Voices drop. Fears rise. This is when your true work begins. When fire becomes your accomplice. When shadows become ingredients. You relight the brazier. It protests at first, as if resenting its own purpose. But soon smoke rises again, thick, curling, fragrant with burnt herbs and last week's secrets. You place your book at the edge of the table, just visible in the glow. You never touch it during night work. You let it rest, like a sleeping witness. Tonight, you're making something new. You don't know what. But the town is restless, and restless people need mystery more than medicine. You begin with wax, melted slowly over a cracked spoon. You add a pinch of soot and a drop of oil that smells like sour apples. You swirl it 3 times, then stop suddenly. That part's important, the sudden stop. It makes people nervous in a good way. You call this mixture the philosopher's residue. It looks like regret sealed in amber. You pour it into a scallop shell. Let it cool on the sill beside your last invention, a jar of water labelled moonsplit brine. It's just well water with salt and a bit of old iron. But you stirred it counterclockwise at midnight. That makes it special. Down the lane, someone sneezes, then coughs, then nothing. You don't react. You're not in the business of panic. You're in the business of control. You grind a piece of chalk into powder, muttering as you do. Not spells, just long lists of vegetables. But you whisper them with gravity, as if naming the unseen. Then you scatter the chalk across your workbench. It makes the room look older, more used, more sacred. You adjust your hood, straighten your spine. Begin the ritual of looking busy, because tonight you are expecting a visitor. You heard it earlier, whispered near the well, half covered by a cough. He's got a flask that changes colour. You do, kind of. It's urine. In glass. Left too long beside the brazier. But it does shimmer now, like something almost magical. You keep it behind a torn curtain, in a small alcove you call the sanctum. They'll arrive soon, the curious, the desperate, the rich enough. You tidy the lab, stack bowls with slight misalignment as if recently used, arrange spoons like a sundial, place a feather where it looks like it might have landed naturally. Then you sit and wait and breathe and become the stillness. Eventually, the knock comes. Not a rattle, not a fist, just a deliberate tap. Once, twice. You open the door slowly, always slowly, revealing a young man with boots too clean and eyes too wide. He says his name. You forget it immediately. He says he's heard about your work. You nod, then step aside. Let the silence usher him in. He looks around nervously. You gesture toward the flask, the urine, and say, "It lives between light and shadow." He doesn't ask what that means, he just stares. You let the moment stretch, then place a hand on a dusty jar and ask, "What are you seeking?" He says the word like it's too big for his mouth. Transmutation. You nod again, very slowly, then ask, "Gold or salvation?" He says both, of course. You take down the jar, open it with a sharp motion, and blow the powder across the flame. It flares a little. The boy gasps. You've done your job. You walk around him once, slowly, then whisper. There is a process, a path, a price. He nods. You tell him to bring you 3 things. An object that belonged to someone who never lied, a stone that has never been dry, and a piece of himself. He looks startled, but he nods again, leaves quietly. You close the door, bolt it, exhale. You've bought yourself at least 3 days. You spend the rest of the night at your bench, experimenting. You boil vinegar with crushed bark. You call it the rising solution. It bubbles violently, then stops. You nod as if that's what you meant it to do. A sage, a scholar, a man standing between worlds. Not the truth. Never the truth. You shift your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Wiggle your toes inside damp boots. Murmur something in mock Latin, and let the night go quiet again. You mix flour with soot and press it into tiny cubes. You let them dry beside the candle. Tomorrow you'll tell someone they absorb unwanted thoughts. You reheat a failed tincture and add honey. It's still a failure, but now it smells like something that could sell. At some point you find yourself staring into the candle's flame. Your eyes water, but you don't look away. You're trying to see what your visitors see. Then you write, Day 2. Lies become truth when spoken slowly beside smoke. Mystery ages better than honesty. You close the book. Let the ink smear slightly. It looks more dramatic that way. Outside, the moon finally appears, pale, indifferent. You whisper to it, "They're starting to believe me." It says nothing, of course, but the silence feels encouraging. You sleep near the fire, one hand on your book, one ear tuned for footsteps, because the price of deception is always company. The town is hung over on its own dread, not sick, not well, just hovering and watching. Your name passes through alleyways and under cloaks, not shouted, whispered, like a shared sin. You prefer it that way. They come to you for the elixir. Not a specific one, just the elixir. The one they believe you have. The one that does everything. Heals the lungs, restores the blood, brings back whatever was lost. A coin, a wife, a sense of order. You have nothing of the sort, but you do have a bottle. It's glass, slightly cloudy, stoppered with beeswax and stuffed with thyme. Inside is a mixture of honey, vinegar, ash, and onion broth. You've steeped it for 4 days. It smells like prophecy. You call it elixir noctem. You always mispronounce it. They never notice. You keep it on a velvet cloth torn from a stolen curtain. Every morning you wipe the bottle with a rag soaked in rose water. It doesn't improve the smell, but it adds to the ritual. When they come, you say very little. This is not a cure, you whisper. It is a key. They always nod. No one asks what it opens. Today an old woman visits. She brings a lump on her neck and 2 coins. You trade her 1 spoon of the elixir. She drinks it, gags, cries, says she feels lighter already. You tell her that means it's working. She bows as she leaves. You note the exact colour of her eyes, in case she returns for more. A merchant arrives with breath that smells like meat gone wrong. He asks if the elixir can soften his thoughts. You tell him it will reorganize his inner geometry. He seems pleased. You sell him 2 spoonfuls. He gives you dried figs in return. You immediately forget his name. You remember the figs. The next is a girl with trembling hands. She doesn't speak, just stares at the flask. You hold her gaze, then dip a drop of elixir on her wrist and whisper, "For balance." She watches it bead and vanish into her skin. Then she smiles, leaves you a blue ribbon. You tie it to your shelf like it was always part of the lab. That night, you stir the next batch. You make it slightly thicker. People trust things that move slowly. You add sage, just enough to confuse the tongue. Then label it Formula 2. You tell yourself it's progress. But part of you knows they don't want healing. Not really. They want a story. They want to say they visited the Alchemist, drank something forbidden, felt the world shift, even if their lump stays lumpy, even if their sadness remains untouched. They want the pageantry of hope, so you give it to them. You chant sometimes, under your breath, in a voice that isn't yours. You wear gloves dipped in soot. They leave prints on everything. This makes the work look ancient. You hang sprigs of dried basil over the door. You tell visitors it blocks the invisible humours. They nod too quickly. Sometimes they cry. A man once asked if you had ever cured yourself. You said, "I am a vessel, not a recipient." He repeated that phrase 3 times, as if it explained anything. You keep a tally in your book. Not of payments, but of phrases that make people stop blinking. Your blood speaks a dialect of Mercury. The illness you name is not the illness you carry. Your cure depends on your silence. You recite them when the room gets too quiet. They never fail. At dusk, a boy returns. He says he gave a piece of himself as requested. You ask what piece. He shows you a bandage. He's cut a lock of his hair and placed it in a pouch with an old pebble and what might be a tooth. You tell him he has completed step 1. He looks both proud and faint. You offer him water with honey. He drinks it like it's sacred. You tell him to return on the night of the next rain. He leaves with something close to reverence. You write, day 3. They do not want cures, they want transformation. Alchemy is the art of dressing hope in shadows. You stare at the flask, the newest one. It looks like something that could glow if lied to gently. You smile, then cap it tight, place it beside the others, and whisper, "You're all they need." You settle into your robe, stretch your back, let your mind go still. Tomorrow you'll change the name of the elixir again. Not because it's different, but because they are. And that is enough to keep the illusion alive. It begins with boots, heavy ones. You hear them in the distance, thudding through mud, echoing off stone. Even the brazier seems to flinch. You don't move, not yet. Instead, you adjust your robe, straighten your shelf of oddly shaped jars, light another candle, not for warmth, but because people behave better in flickering light. Then, a knock, not polite, not curious. The kind of knock that assumes it will be obeyed. You open the door slowly, shoulders square, eyes distant, mouth slightly parted as if mid-revelation. On the threshold stands a man in red wool and poor posture. Behind him a clerk with ink-stained hands and a face like sour bread. They are not sick, they are not curious, they are something worse, official. The red wool man speaks. "You are the alchemist?" You pause. Let the words settle in the air. Then say, softly, "I am the current keeper of transformation." He doesn't like that. You can tell by the twitch in his eyebrow. But he enters. The clerk follows, mumbling something about permits. You offer them both a seat. They decline. You remain standing, hands folded, chin lifted, like a man moments away from discovering a new element. You're not. You've just forgotten where you put the vinegar. The man in red sniffs the air. He grimaces. You've been reported. You nod slowly. Of course you have. That was inevitable. They say you sell potions, that you claim to change lead, cure disease. You correct him. I offer potential. I claim nothing. He doesn't like that either. The clerk begins to write. His pen scratches too loudly. You drift across the room, fingers grazing jars and bottles, each touch deliberate. Transformation, you say, is not a promise. It is a direction. They both blink. The man in red crosses his arms. Are you trained? Certified by any order? You smile gently. Shake your head. No, but I listen. I observe. I respond. That confuses them. You lift a spoonful of powder, crushed sage mostly, and toss it into the brazier. It flares briefly. The room smells like burnt tea and possibility. The clerk coughs. The man steps back. Enough theatrics. You nod. Of course. You reach for your book. Open it to a random page covered in looping marks and charcoal rings. You place it on the table. Turn it slightly so it faces them. Say nothing. They peer down. Their brows furrow. The clerk flips a page. Then another. Finally, the red wool man grunts. This is unreadable. You lower your voice. Yes, that is the nature of hidden knowledge. He closes the book too quickly. You flinch, just a little. Just enough to make it seem sacred. He leans closer. You're a fraud. You meet his gaze. No more than the world requires. There is a long pause. The clerk writes that down. You're oddly proud. The man seems unsure now. He thought he would find a snake oil charlatan. Instead, he's found someone tired, soft-spoken, and possibly very dangerous. You hand him a small pouch. Inside, a pinch of salt, a dried petal, and a copper coin with a hole in it. You call it symbolic assurance. He doesn't open it, just stares. What is this? You whisper. A gesture of transparency. He pockets it, says nothing. The clerk coughs, glances nervously toward the shelves. You watch the air shift, just slightly. They are not convinced, but they are uncertain. That's enough. Finally, the man straightens. We'll be watching. You nod. Then we'll be in agreement. They leave, not in a hurry, but not at ease either. You close the door behind them. Latch it gently. Let the silence settle back in like an old robe. You lean against the wall, exhale through your teeth. Your hands are shaking. You make tea. As the herbs steep, you write in your book. Day 4. The real danger is not truth or lies, but the thin space in between where people look too closely. You sip slowly. Let the warmth reach your fingertips. Later you rearrange your shelves. Move the glowing bottle to a darker corner. Label your ashes with vaguer names. Dull the sharp edges of your mystery, just in case they return. Because survival, in this line of work, isn't about brilliance. It's about balance. It begins with small things. A loaf of bread left outside your door. A stone with a symbol scratched into it, not yours but left for you. A child who bows too deeply when he passes. You ignore it at first, assume it's coincidence, confusion. a side effect of living near smoke. But then a woman kneels in your doorway. She says she dreamed of your face, says you stood at the edge of a lake made of ink, says you whispered her name and it echoed through her teeth. You don't know her, but you say, "Then the lake is watching." She gasps, presses a sprig of heather into your hand, leaves without blinking. You place the heather in a jar, label it potential. By week's end, 5 people have called you master. One leaves honeycomb wrapped in silk. Another swears your elixir made his crops grow overnight, despite the fact that it's January. The belief is spreading, not like fire, like mold, soft, persistent, strange. They've stopped asking questions. Now they make offerings. They bring things they think you'll want. A boot print in clay, a bone carved into a flute, a locket filled with feathers and dust. You thank them, every time, gravely, softly, because what else can you do? You try to scale back the mystery, start speaking more plainly, water down the elixir, hide the more dramatic bottles, but it only makes them more certain. They say you've become subtle, say you've crossed the threshold, say your silence is proof of completion. One man follows you to the well and asks to see your true form. You say, "You are looking at it." He weeps. Another leaves her child at your doorstep with a note. Cure him if you can. If not, let him become like you. You return the child by morning. Tell the mother he will grow strong. He has no symptoms, but she falls to her knees, calling it a miracle. You write in your book. Day 6. They no longer want answers. They want to dissolve into belief. You try to teach a lesson. You fill a bowl with ash and spit. Call it grey water of finality. You tell a man to anoint his hands with it, then bury them in soil for a day. He does. Says he saw visions of the underworld. Thanks you with a song about bees. You consider leaving, but your boots are worn, and you're not sure who you'd be elsewhere, so you stay and watch. They begin drawing your symbol, a circle within a square within a circle, on doors, on carts, on each other's skin. You never gave them that symbol. They invented it, then gave it to you. Now they thank you for it. Children repeat your phrases in the street. Salt remembers, the moon is watching, water carries permission. You say none of these things anymore, but they say them anyway. A man insists his wounds healed when you passed by. You weren't even looking. You were thinking about soup. You start to dread the knock on the door, not because of illness, not because of accusation, but because you know it will come from someone who's already decided what you are, and you are running out of ways to disagree politely. You begin dreaming of smoke that speaks. It tells you to listen. You wake with your hand in the brazier ash, unburned. One night, someone carves your name, or the idea of your name, into the chapel door. The priest is furious, but he doesn't erase it. He visits the next day, holding a pouch. "Can you see what's inside?" he asks. You don't open it, just press it to your ear and say, "It's waiting." He nods, leaves you bread and 2 candles. You didn't ask for them. You've stopped asking for anything. One afternoon, a group gathers outside, not to protest, to chant. They're holding bowls, feathers, pages with ink circles. They rock back and forth, humming something tuneless but thick with intention. You don't go out. You just watch through a crack in the shutter. Hands still, heart loud. You whisper to the air. You've made a myth of a man too tired to object. That night you sit with the elixir, the latest version. It's clear now, almost pleasant, harmless, utterly ineffective. You drink some. It tastes like silence. You stare into the flame until your eyes water. Then write. Day 7. They no longer believe in what I say. They believe in what I don't. You blow out the candle. Let the dark return. Outside, someone sings your name like it's a prayer. Inside, you mouth it back like a warning. The fire burns lower than usual. You didn't feed it. It didn't complain. Your robe lies folded on the bench. For the first time in weeks, you wear only your underclothes, patched, comfortable, anonymous. You watch the smoke twist upward without trying to interpret it. Today feels different. Not dangerous, not safe, just final. You haven't seen a visitor in 3 days. Not since the priest began using your name in sermons. He says you are a reminder of temptation, of pride, of the thin veil between healing and heresy. You suppose that's fair. The book lies closed beside you. You haven't written in it since the night the children left dried nettles outside your door. They called it tribute. You thought it might be time to stop. 2 nights ago, a boy arrived with nothing but a spoon and a question. Can I become like you? You told him no, but he left the spoon anyway. You added it to the others, your collection of misplaced faiths. You sweep the floor, not because it needs it, but because it's the only sound that still obeys you. Dust rises, floats, settles again. You don't light the brazier. You don't arrange the jars. You just sit. Until a knock. Not loud, not nervous. A single knock with no rhythm. You open the door and find no one. Just a small pouch resting on the threshold. Inside, salt, clean, dry, carefully folded into a square of cloth. You hold it for a long time. Salt was once currency. Salt was once holy. You pour half of it into your palm, toss it into the fire. The flame cracks, flares white, fades. You whisper, "That's enough." You leave the rest of the salt in the pouch, tie it shut, place it on the shelf beside your first experiment, a jar of water with an iron nail and a sprig of rosemary. You never knew what it was supposed to become. It never did. Later, a woman comes to the door. You know her face, but not her name. She speaks softly. "My daughter still believes in your tincture. She says it keeps the dreams away." You nod. "Then let her keep it." The woman weeps. You do not. You offer her a jar of plain water. She doesn't ask what's in it. She just clutches it to her chest. "Thank you," she says. "Whatever you were, thank you." You don't answer. She leaves. You sit again. Your hands smell of smoke and old leaves. Outside, the crier continues. Inside, everything stills. You open the book one last time, not to write, to read. Page after page of loops and lines, drawn in a language you invented to fool others, and slowly began to understand yourself. You reach the last page, blank. You leave it that way. Not everything needs an ending. You place the book in the hearth, not dramatically, just carefully. It does not burn fast, but it burns. You watch until the last curl of smoke rises, then open the door. The world is still out there, still coughing, still praying, still believing in something. You do not take the robe. You do not take the flask. You take nothing. You walk without a stick, without a name, without a claim to mystery. Just a man. In old clothes, exiting the stage before the curtain falls on its own. And as you go, you whisper to no one in particular. That was enough. You were never meant to be a legend, not a healer, not a prophet, not a master of metals or miracles. You were just someone with a cloak, a candle, and a tone of voice that made people believe. And that somehow was enough. No one will remember your real name. They'll remember the bottle, the smell of sage, the way your hand hovered over flames without flinching. They'll remember the night they drank something strange and felt something shift, even if it was only in their chest, even if it was only hope. In a world full of sickness and silence, you offered smoke and story. You gave them direction, even when you had no map. And maybe that's the closest thing we have to alchemy, not gold, not immortality, but the quiet transformation of fear into belief. So now, let it all rest. The jars, the whispers, the false Latin scribbled like spells. Let the ash settle in its bowl. Let the last flask go quiet. You can slip out of the robe now. You've worn it long enough. You can close the door and walk gently into the next lie, or the next life, or simply sleep. There are more stories to slip into, more strange masks to try on, more forgotten corners of the past where you might become someone else for a little while. A runaway monk, a counterfeit knight, a saint who stole their miracles. So dim the lantern, close your eyes, and be ready, because next time you might wake up somewhere stranger still. Good night, Alchemist. You fooled them all, even you.